These French these contracts or treaties with France, known better as the monopoly on archaeological excavations, gave a total freedom to the French delegation to carry out explorations in the country. But the site of Susa became gradually the focal point of French excavations and interest in the country. The excavations at Susa were funded by the French Ministry of Public Instruction with an exceptional budget approved specifically for the delegation, and the work was also heavily supported by the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs through its embassy in Tehran. In this way, the work of the French delegation in Persia was not only a matter of culture, science, and acquisition of art objects, but it was a matter of national pride coupled with an interest in political expansion and influence. During the early years of the monopoly, the delegation carried out explorations outside the plain of Khuzestan, where Susa is located, and expanding its work to the north and south of the country, but there was an inevitable Susa-centrism in the work of the delegation, which increased because of the departure of Jacques de Morgan, the founder of the delegation, and especially after the First World War, with a cut in the budget of the French mission. And this brings us to the early years of the 20th century. Here's another view of the French excavations at Susa. There's hundreds of workers, and they left these empty spaces at the site, and the objects are to be seen at the Louvre today. Just a year after the end of the Great War, World War I, a man named James Henry Breasted, a famous Egyptologist, founded the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago in 1919 with Rockefeller's financial support. Breasted himself was an Egyptologist and was a driving force behind all the Oriental Institute expeditions in the Middle East, especially in Iran. If it hadn't been for his dedicated support, the Oriental Institute excavations in Iran would have never happened. With this, let me talk a bit about the situation in Iran, political, social, and cultural situation in Iran in the early years of the 20th century. Actually, the first 3 decades of the past century was a time of important socio-political changes which considerably affected the future of archaeology in the country. The first significant event was the constitutional revolution of Iran, which engendered and promoted new ideas and notably a conscience about Iran's culture, heritage, and economic resources, along with the stimulation of nationalistic feelings in defense of the historical heritage of the country. And the beginning of the American involvement in the archaeological exploration of Iran can be understood, in fact, in the context of political rivalries, a Franco-German rivalry backed by the Iranian elite and nationalists and the United States. The most important factor shaping the future of archaeology was without doubt the declining state of the Qajar government. And this was directly followed in 1925 by the rise of a new ruling dynasty in Iran, the Pahlavi dynasty, which couldn't necessarily be expected to respect all the concessions given by the Qajars. And one of these concessions was the French monopoly on the archaeological excavations in Iran. In 1923, when Reza Khan, who became later Reza Shah, the first king of the Pahlavi dynasty, this new dynasty, when he was taking over the country, a group of Iranian elite and intellectuals founded the Society for National Heritage in Tehran in order to promote public interest in ancient knowledge and crafts and to preserve antiquities and handicrafts. The society organized conferences and invited a German archaeologist, Ernst Herzfeld, to give lectures on prehistory and history of ancient Iran. In fact, Herzfeld had been residing in Iran for a while. He went first to Iran in 1905, and then he went back in the 1920s. So he was in Tehran at that time, and here you see him with a number of intellectuals and high Iranian officials. You see Herzfeld here. The second man is Nasser al-Mulk, who became the Ministry of Culture later. And this man is Mr. Tadayyan, who was the Minister of Public Instruction at that time. This man is Nusrat al-Dawla Firuz Mirza, highly placed official, was later killed by Reza Shah, but a very influential man, actually the son of Farman Farma. This man is Hossein Ala, who became the first ambassador of the new government in Washington, and Arbab Khosrow Jamshid, the head of the Zoroastrian community in Tehran. So Herzfeld befriended or had befriended with these people long before the abolition of the French monopoly and the passage of the Antiquities Law in Iran. In 1925, the Majlis, the parliament, formally deposed the last king of the Qajars, and a few weeks later, Reza Khan was proclaimed the new king of Persia. And as a result of new reforms in the country, the agreement abolishing French monopoly on archaeological excavations was finally signed in 1927. The Act for Antiquities of Iran, or the Antiquities Law, was finally approved in November 1930. And just after the passage of the law, Herzfeld, being in Iran and now serving as the archaeological advisor of the government, sent a telegram to Bredsted, James Henry Bredsted, the director and founder of the Oriental Institute, and urged American action. Bredsted replied to Herzfeld at once, and subsequently Herzfeld asked for permission to dig at Persepolis, which he got by unanimous vote of the Persian parliament that granted the first excavation permit under the new law to the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago. And this was the beginning of the American involvement in the archaeology of Iran, with teams from the Oriental Institute and from the USC Museum in Philadelphia. These excavations brought to the United States the first exemplars of Iranian art, beside those sold by another American, Arthur Upham Pope, and enriched not only museums' collections in this country, but also they promoted Iranian studies and caused the creation of chairs in Iranian studies, Iranian art history, and archaeology all over US and Canada. Here's a picture of the famous Arthur Upham Pope, who was first a professor of philosophy in Berkeley, but he had an affair with a woman, actually one of his students, and they fled to the East Coast. Actually, they got married, Phyllis Ackerman, and he went first to Iran as a photographer, but he became interested in Iranian art to the point that he became one of the major dealers of Iranian antiquities in the West. But his publication, The Survey of Persian Art, has been a monumental work and a major reference for Iranian studies.